Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast, Green Socialist Notes, is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that we ran on in 2020. And I hope you are participating in the No Kings Day demonstrations today when we're going live. A massive turnout will help demonstrate opposition and resistance to the authoritarian, plutocratic, and militaristic priorities of the Trump regime. And current events are flooding us like a fire hose, or maybe more appropriate metaphor is a water cannon against demonstrators. Democratic politicians were shot and one of them killed in Minneapolis this morning. Israel started another war, this time against Iran. Trump has sent in the US military to suppress the resistance of immigrant communities against the Trump administration's body snatchers. We have a constitutional crisis with the Trump administration defying court orders, and that's not all. But one way to put all that in perspective is to compare our situation to other countries, particularly where the far right is rising. So today we're going to discuss what is happening in Poland. And what happens in Poland doesn't stay in Poland. It's connected to the rise of the far right across Europe and around the world, including here in America. And so today we're going to discuss the recent presidential election in Poland and what we can learn to help our own struggles in America. So our guest today is Szymon Martys. He's a political scientist, a journalist, a left-wing activist, and I've come to know him as the coordinator of the European Network for Solidarity with Ukraine and Against War in the Ukraine solidarity work we've been involved in. So in May, on the 18th of May, there was a runoff election for the president of Poland, and the right-wing Christian nationalist candidate, supported by the Law and Justice Party and other far-right parties, beat the center-right candidate, supported by the ruling Civic Platform, by a narrow 51 to 49% margin. And in the first round, the two left-wing parties, Lewica, which stands for the left, and Razem, which stands for together, received respectively 4.2 and 4.9%, which is better than they had done. We had a member of Razem, Eva Pospizinska, on the podcast in February, and the left and together had been part of the government until October last year, when Razem left over economic austerity policies, while the left remained in that coalition. The next parliamentary elections are scheduled for 2027, but they might have a snap election sooner. So I got to spend a day with Szymon in Warsaw, Poland, when I was in Europe in November, and we talked mostly about the rise of the far right in Europe and the US. Trump had just been elected a couple of weeks before, and now the far right's had another victory in this Polish election last month. So we need to understand what that means. So welcome, Szymon. And why don't you just start by giving us an overview of what happened in the election and what this right-wing victory means for Poland, for Europe, and for us in the US.
Hello, Howie. Thank you for having me, especially as we talked before, in a day that is really interesting in many ways in the US. So having a different topic is also vital to see the whole picture of the rising far right. And I would start with the whole overview, as you said, or the overview about the elections. So the presidential elections happened recently. The second round, the runoff, was on the 1st of June, which is celebrated in Poland and much of the Eastern Europe as International Children's Day. So it wasn't a good present for Children's Day, I would say. So the election was very close. To the last moment, we didn't really know who was going to win, because even at the exit polls showed that Rafał Trzaskowski, the candidate of the liberal centrist coalition, won. When we woke up the next day, we realized that the candidate of the right-wing former ruling party called Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, which in Polish means law and justice. So you can imagine the politics of a party named like that, won. We have to remember that the candidate of the Peace Party, he tried to present himself as an independent. People remembered the rule of Peace Party. It was just 2 years ago. So they tried to hide the connection between the party and the candidate.
When you say Peace Party, you're talking about the right-wing party. You're using their initials.
Yeah, the right wing, the Peace, the Law and Justice Party.
Yeah.
He is president of an institution called Institute of the National Remembrance, which is a historical institute. It's a state institution, but in Poland, it's not like the government is in charge of all the institutions. There are some institutions that are still ruled by the former ruling party. Like this is the Institute of National Remembrance, but also National Bank, for example, the Constitutional Tribunal, the High Court. So there are institutions which are still being really associated with the former right-wing ruling party, and one of them was this Institute of National Remembrance. So he is a historian himself, the new already president, Karol Nawrocki. He is a historian, but with a very, let's say, weird background. I say weird when what I mean is he was connected with you, and he's never said he didn't with the criminals from his hometown, with some people with neo-Nazi history, football hooligans. He was accused of illegally taking over an elderly man's flat, using an apartment in the Museum of the Second World War. He was also in charge of that institution, free of charge for over 200 days. He bringing prostitutes to the one of the hotels in Sopot. I would say a very unique history of a presidential candidate. Very much in the Trumpist manner, in a sense that you can do everything and you still will be elected, because the voters don't really care until you are against those who are in charge, who are in power. So it was kind of a situation like that all the right wing, even the far righters, like the Konfederacja Party, which in the second round they said they don't support anyone. Their presidential candidate Sławomir Mencen didn't support anyone, but many of the politicians, MPs, MEPs, actually did openly said they're going to vote for Nawrocki in the second round. And also a candidate more on the far right from Mencen, Grzegorz Braun. At the beginning, after the first round of the elections, he said he's not going to support anyone. But at the end, he supported Nawrocki. Like he said, everyone should vote against Trzaskowski, the candidate of the Liberals. So even very fringe right-wing groups supported Nawrocki in the second round. That I didn't expect that to happen so much. So it was in a way that everyone who was against not just the governing coalition but this whole democratic camp, we can say that the democratic camp is the ruling coalition, which is, we probably will talk more about it later, and also Razem, which is on the left and is in the opposition but comes from this core of parties which are against the peace government, which lost power 2 years ago. So everyone from people from that camp voted for Trzaskowski, even if they weren't happy about it. Like Razem wasn't happy about it. We're going to talk about it later, I guess, again. But the far right was very much united around Nawrocki, and people who vote for peace, for the Law and Justice Party, are very much they have their own means of communication and media. It's much like Fox News on steroids, I would say. Like the televisions like Republika or Polsce 24 are the Fox on steroids. Yeah, that I can, you know, if we are looking for any American you know, kind of similarity that we can say, that these media are the only media that those people actually watch. I see it on a daily basis. I live in a region on the east part of Poland, which is very much dominated by the conservative narrative. I know people who vote for these parties, for even the far righters like Grzegorz Braun. So I see that they're very much disconnected with any kind of information outside of that spectrum. So I would finish at that point. Maybe you have specific questions about the things that might be more interesting for an American viewer, I guess. So,
well, we're going to put in the chat a number of articles that Szymon identified so people can read more on it. And we'll get those in the chat, and we'll put them in the program notes. One of the things that those articles talked about was the youth vote, particularly young males, who a lot of whom are leaning right, but also left. They're not voting for the center parties. Why don't you talk about that dynamic? Because we have the same thing here in the United States. I mean, the left, generally the younger, you know, under 30 vote progressive, but in this last election, a significant cohort went to Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that there's in the whole world we have the same situation. Maybe not the same scale everywhere, but it's very similar. I mean, one thing is that the vote of the youth is more radicalized both ways. But it's also very different when we look at the gender. So in Poland, we're not maybe like South Korea, where this gap between young men and young women politically is very, very deep. Like most of the male, even if they don't identify as far right, actually are leaning towards all the things that are connected with the far right politics. And it's the same with women who, even if don't specifically identify as left, are leaning towards all the left, political elements that we identify as leftist, progressive. It's the same in Poland. We have a very big divide between men and women, young men and women, when we talk about the political choices. So I think we're like, when we look at all the countries in the world, we might say that Poland is in the middle of that spectrum, but it's a very visible thing that the young male and young female voters vote completely differently. So if just young voters, when we say young voters, we say between 18 to 39. That's how they identify it in Poland. The first place would be Sławomir Mencen, so the candidate of the far right. But the second person would be Adrian Zandberg, so the candidate of Razem. So if we would with just those voters, the second round would look completely different, as you can imagine. And And again, it's a difference between men and women, because young men would mostly vote for Mensen, so for the far right, and young women for Adrian Zandberg, so for the not so really far left, because if you think about it in European spectrum, Razem would be like a modest social democratic party, really. So so overall, the candidates of the main political parties, like both Trzaskowski and Nawrocki, even Nawrocki even got worse than Trzaskowski, are completely out of the interest of young people, I would say. Of course, there's different things that can gather people around Mensen, different things around Zandberg. I would say that Zandberg is particularly interesting for younger people who have some political identification, because I think the housing crisis is very big in Poland, and Razem talks a lot about the whole issue. So that's one thing. But for men, which is interesting, but also it's a kind of thing that exists mostly in their minds, is a question of this security issues, like migration, whatever they think about it. They are very critical about migration. I mean, young men mostly. Like getting Poland involved in the war in Ukraine, so they will die in the war or something like that. That's the issues they worry about, although most of them are really just kind of artificial things, to be honest. The housing crisis is real. The immigration issue exists, but it's not like it's threatening young men, because actually we have a lack of people who can work in some areas in Poland, like the farming industry or construction building. So we actually need migration. So in short, I think that's the overview of the youth vote. There's probably a lot more to say, but I guess if we have time, we can come back to that point. But I think there's a lot of other things we can talk about also.
Well, when we talked in Warsaw back in November, one of the things you told me that I didn't know is that Poland is the fastest secularizing country in the world. And that's very different than the US, where the Christian right has enormous influence. And so how does that affect the left-right politics and also social issues like abortion and LGBT rights? When we talked with Eva Pospieszynska, she got involved eventually in Razem through the struggle for abortion rights, where Poland seems to have allowed more rights, but I know it was an issue in this campaign. So how does the secularization relate to these social issues, and how did they relate to the campaign?
Interesting question, because come to think about it now, we got a candidate from the right-wing party who is even more on the far right of his own political camp, winning. But he won, as I said, mostly due to.
Okay, the screen looks frozen. I don't know whether that's me or Szymon. So we had a little technical problem as we set up. So I'm gonna, fill in the gap here till we get Szymon back. Maybe he can hear me and his screen is just frozen, but I don't hear him. So, one of the things that's concerning is that, the right wing in Poland is, the anti-immigrant sentiment is an issue like it is here. And there are a lot of Ukrainians who are refugees that Szymon was talking about there. And there's a growing resentment against them. they're perceived as competing for jobs with Poles, particularly young men. And one of these articles that's in the chat talks about, educated middle-class Ukrainians in Poland who are competing for those kind of jobs. But there's also the fact that Szymon mentioned that Ukrainians and migrant workers generally are filling the agricultural and construction positions like they are here in the U.S. So why don't you just take off from where you were. I was just kind of talking about the immigration issue a little bit.
Sorry for that. There's some technical issues with probably with my device somehow. Okay, so where am I? Okay, the secularization. So people may think it's weird because the candidate which relates a lot with the Catholic Church wins the elections. But when the interesting thing, when you look at his voters of the first round, where he got this 30-something percent of the vote, it's mostly people who really were associated with the church, as very devoted Catholic, coming from conservative regions, mostly either village municipalities or small towns. But when we look at the second round and the people who voted for him, we see that although he was explicitly anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ rights, and so on, not all of his voters in the second round were like that. There was a bigger group saying, we can support, liberalization the abortion rights and so on. They won't get it with this president, but they voted for him because they voted against the liberals. That's what they did. So the interesting thing was like the candidate of the far right, Sławomir Mencen, was talking after the first round of the elections, was having like interviews with both of the candidates. So one of them, Trzaskowski, and he asked them to sign what he called a Toruń Declaration. He lives in Toruń, that's a city in northern Poland, and he was asking them to support a few of his ideas. So Trzaskowski didn't sign it. He had a good interview with him, but disagreeing with the far right, obviously. But he did meet with him. And Nawrocki also met with him, and he said, "Yeah, I will sign everything." But what was interesting in that declaration, although Mencen himself was in the presidential campaign in the first round, said he's against abortion in any case, in that declaration, he didn't put any of this kind of cultural social issues. It was just, it was about migration, as I remember, or gun ownership, stuff like that, but no abortion stuff, no LGBTQ rights, anything. One way or another, he didn't put that down. So he knows that his voters are, even although they are far right, they are split on cultural issues. It's not that like all of them are anti-abortion or something, because it's not true. All the surveys show that. It's quite a diverse group, even if they identify as right wing. They're not always so much interested in banning abortion or anti-LGBTQ hate speech, stuff like that. So still, I think the secularization process is very, very it's steady gaining ground. It's actually if you again, I just recently, because I just watched the news just before we started our program, and the interesting thing that was that the church is not gonna organize this committee about the children's rights in church, the pedophilia issue. And there was also a survey showing, do you think, do you trust the church, the Catholic Church in Poland, which is the main church, obviously? and it's like 45 to 43, 45% of the people said, no, I don't trust the church. 33 said, yes, I trust the church. And again, if you look closely at it, younger people said, no, I don't trust the church. The older people will say probably, yes, I do. So it's a very, again, there's a deep divide that I said on cultural issues and political issues with young men, women. And there is a big divide on cultural, religious issues between both younger generation and the older people, and the people living in small municipalities, small towns in the east, center of Poland, and those living in the west and in big cities.
So if I understand what you're saying the right is using abortion and LGBT to mobilize votes, but there's probably not going to be much consequence. So abortion rights, which I know were liberalized, are safer now. Is that correct?
No. The abortion rights were not liberalized, actually, and they won't be liberalized, I think, because we didn't talk about what the president in Poland can do and can't do. What he can do is he can veto any law that passes the parliament, and the ruling coalition doesn't have enough votes to overthrow the presidential veto. So there won't be much changes in the coming years. That's an obvious thing. Although Nawrocki himself now, after the election, said, I can probably think I'm against marriage for LGBTQ people, but I can consider some kind of relationship issues, but it doesn't really know we don't really know what he means. And again, we don't know because the ruling coalition is also divided on the issue. It's I didn't give the overview of the ruling coalition for the people who watch us. We have the main liberal coalition. It's a coalition itself. It's called Koalicja Obywatelska, the civic coalition, which is contains the Platforma Obywatelska, which is kind of liberal, traditional liberal party, liberal in European sense, not American sense. So like a more center-right neoliberal economy, but much softer on social issues than it was years back. It was more like Christian democratic. Now it's more like softer on it. But also there are other parts of that coalition which are like small center-left parties, like the Green Party, which is different than the Greens in many other countries, because more like a neoliberal now than any left wing. But there is also the New Left, which you mentioned before. And there is also, again, a coalition called Trzecia Droga, the Third Way, which contains a party called Polska 2050, Poland 250, which is, again, more like a liberal party in European sense, again. And there is also what is called the Polish Peasants' Party, which is historically an agrarian party. It's like Christian democratic. And now they never historically did that, but now they tend to present themselves as very, conservative part of that coalition. So when we had the vote on the criminalization of abortion, not even
Looks like he's frozen again. When I said liberalization, I guess what happened was a referendum to criminalize abortion was defeated. That's what Eva Pospizinski, who we had on here before, got involved in. That's my understanding. So it's like here, the social issues the right uses to mobilize their vote. But if I understand what Szymon is saying, the secularization means a lot of the voters are not under the influence so much of the Catholic Church. But, the plurality doesn't trust it. So I guess what that means is it opens the door for liberalization, although they are still behind the United States. And, we got a right-wing government. And although some of the Republicans in Congress want to go after abortion rights and LGBT rights and abortion rights more than the Supreme Court did. It doesn't seem to be their priority right now. It seems to be, this bill, the big, beautiful bill to, take away a lot of our social programs in order to fund tax cuts for the very rich. Here he is.
Yeah, I'm back. It's something wrong with my device, I think, but we'll keep on trying. Sorry for that. Yeah, if I can come back, the abortion rights won't be changed. I think still, if we have this president, and also, which is frustrating for many people who voted for this coalition, and is also the factor that gives Razem more votes because people are not satisfied with the coalition on many levels, is that there are those elements in the coalition, like the Polish Peasants Party, which will be against any kind of changes in the abortion law, any kind of changes to the laws about the LGBTQ community. I don't think it's going to happen. We have this new idea that, again, voting on the law about civil partnership for both same-sex and opposite-sex couples. But again, I don't know how many of those PSL, the Polish Peasants Party MPs will vote for it, or I'm guessing they have about 26 MPs, if I'm right. I'm guessing not more than 5-6 will vote for it. That's my guess, really, because they think, which is really not true. Again, they think the voters are more conservative than they really are. So this is also it's not just the president, the new far-right president, but it's also the part of the coalition that are conservative. But I believe it will change sooner or later. The factors that I said, like the secularization process, which began, the new situation among the youth, which is also changing, especially the young women. We had this big movement in 220, the pro-abortion protests. I think it will get us somewhere in the future. This political situation is very bad. It's a kind of a backlash. When we think about the elections that happened just 2 years ago, they were seen as a kind of democratic change, but it looks like on many levels it was not met with all the things that we as voters expected. Like there's no change towards the immigrants. It's the same rhetoric as the far right, really. There's no changes in these cultural issues, so people are frustrated. And in 2 years, I believe the right can come back to power on this turbo scale, because it's not going to be peace, just the peace, the Law and Justice Party, because they are not able to govern themselves now. They don't have enough support, but they will probably try to form a coalition with Confederacja, with the far right, which also has this anti-Ukrainian sentiment in it. So that's the sad news. But sooner or later, I think we must have changes on this cultural issues, not just one issue.
So what does this mean for Poland on international questions? Ukraine, what are the politics there with regard to Israel, the genocide in Gaza, now this war in Iran, and maybe also about the climate issue? Where does this government, where's that going in Poland?
Yeah, so when we again, we think what the president can do and he can't do, We must say that Poland is not a country like US or France, where the president is the
We're back to technical problems. I'll just say one thing on the climate issue. And, I've been working with the East European left a lot on Ukraine, but all of them support nuclear power. Sociální Ruch in Ukraine, Razum in Poland, everybody but the Greens, which, of course, I think is a big mistake because for the amount of money you invest in nuclear power and the time it takes to build it, you can build a lot more solar and wind and clean renewables. So
yeah, I'm back.
Szymon is back. And he's frozen again. And this is frustrating. So I know when I was in East Europe, the question of Israel and its treatment of the Palestinians was a difficult issue. I'm not so sure about Poland. I know in Czechoslovakia, the Greens are really the only pro-Palestinian party, and they take a lot of grief for that because there's just sort of automatic support for Israel. It's sort of a legacy of the Holocaust. But Szymon is back, so let's go before you.
I don't know for how long. We'll see. Okay, I'll try to be brief then and fast with what I say. So when we think about what president can do and can't do in Poland, it's like more, let's say it's between France and Germany. So in Germany, he's just a representative. In France or in US, he can do everything he wants. In Poland, it's just very limited, but he has some powers, and especially when we think about the international politics and when we think about military. But he has to do it with cooperation with the government, even if he's the opposition to the government, coming from the opposition to the government. So he can't appoint, the ambassador, for example, by himself. He has to do it with, agreement with the government, and so on. It's the same generals. So it's not that he can do everything he wants. We can say that Nawrocki was very harsh on Ukraine issues during the presidential campaign, which was quite odd because the party he was supported by, Law and Justice, was quite pro-Ukrainian. Yeah, when the full-scale invasion started, the Law and Justice Party was in power and it hosted refugees. There was a lot of issues about that, but all of at least we can say that it was more or less supportive towards Ukraine. And Nawrocki was more like.
So I think where Szymon's going on that is the right in Poland is turning on Ukraine, partly because of the immigration issue, partly because the far right in Europe, like it here, is they're not supporting Ukraine, like Orban in Hungary. And they're more friendly with Putin, even though he's invading another country. So Poland's support, which was also military, I guess is in question now. Okay, go ahead, Szymon. He's frozen again. Well, the other question I want to ask Szymon is about the prospects for the left in Ukraine, particularly Razum. We've had a member on the podcast. They've been very supportive of Ukraine, of strong climate action, of egalitarian economic policies. And they seem to have got some appeal in the last election. As Szymon was talking about, their candidate, Sandberg, got more than the other left parties. And so.
Okay, I'm back again, trying another device. Okay, so coming back to the you were talking already about the left, but I would just come back to the Ukraine issue and hold the international issues as a whole. So when it comes to Ukraine, Nawrocki was saying that they shouldn't be part of the EU or NATO unless they will resolve the historical issues, like saying the Volhynia massacre and so on. And he was very much, and he was very harsh towards Ukrainian refugees. But it was a topic in the presidential elections as a whole. And Rafał Trzaskowski, the liberal candidate, which was quite odd, started it, saying this 800 plus, which is like at 800 zlotys per child. It's a child allowance in Poland, which also Ukrainian refugees can benefit from. Said they shouldn't be Ukrainians shouldn't be given that unless they work, which is quite odd because it was mostly women who with children, so it's hard for them to find work. And then Nawrocki started to go even further, saying, that Ukrainians shouldn't be the first to go to hospitals. It should be the Polish people who should be the first. So excluding Ukrainians from even using the hospital. So it was very, very harsh campaign using anti-Ukrainian rhetoric. Mostly because of the far-right Konfederacja stance, and Grzegorz Braun, who was even further to the right to Konfederacja. So everyone was trying to get this, anti-Ukrainian vote somehow. Now he's more mild after the elections. He's not saying some kind of a weird stuff now, like he was doing during the campaign. So we're gonna see what's gonna happen. I can assure you that nothing is going to change when it comes to military help, because no one in Poland is against sending military aid to Ukraine. What I fear the most is kind of the thing that Nawrocki is going to publicly argue with Ukrainian authorities about, like the Volyn issue and all of that. It's not going to have any kind of real effect, but it's going to be a kind of a public issue that's going to be talked a lot, saying that Ukrainian-Polish relations are getting worse because of the result of the presidential elections. And also we're going to see who's going to be cooperating with the president, because if it's going to, some people say it's going to be some people coming from the Konfederacja party, so more anti-Ukrainian refugee sentiment here and there. The president can also try to send some specific laws to parliament and try to pass them, but the parliament has to support them, so it's not just he can do it by himself again. So I would say more going to be changed rhetorically towards Ukraine than really than it's going to be real changes. But it yet remains to be seen. He was having an interview when he said again after the elections. He said that he's again with a Hungarian news outlet where he was saying he's against joining NATO, Ukraine joining NATO and EU yet. So that I don't know what does that mean. When it comes to Israel, it's complicated because it's not an issue in Poland. I mean, obviously we vote like the most of the world votes about the Palestinian resolutions. So it's not we're not voting like the US. It's like voting like the whole world, like supporting Palestinian state. But also it's like maintaining good relations with both Israel and Palestine. And it's not really a thing that we talked on a daily basis. We talked about it now because of the attack on Iran, if the Polish citizens are safe, because there's a lot of Polish citizens on both, in Israel, Palestine, countries surrounding them, because there's a lot of mixed marriages and so on. But it's not it's not an issue that we talked about really so much, probably like in the US. That's would be the short version of my answer. When we talked about climate, again, rhetorically, it's going to get worse because Nawrocki is very much, a coal mine supporter, saying all that. Maybe if we talk about any law changes in the law that will expand the wind energy might be affected because he might veto it. So that might be one thing that can officially, get worse. But again, rhetorically, he's going to say a lot. This anti-climate change. I don't believe in climate change stuff. Yeah, that would be again my short answer for that.
So where does that leave the left, Razum and other forces in Poland? They gained a little bit at the first round of the presidential election. It looks like Szymon is frozen again. So when he comes back, I'll ask him that question. They went from around a little over 2% to nearly 5% in the first round of this presidential election. Razum has representatives in the parliament. So they represent a left-green kind of politics. They're very good on climate action, except nuclear power. So I wonder, I want to ask Szymon how they think, Razum and other forces on the left in Poland are going to do in the coming period. But I see Szymon still got his picture there, but he's frozen. He may be talking, thinking he's on. So we'll just try to be patient here and wait for Szymon to come back on. We haven't had so many technical problems before. Here he comes back. Looks like he's coming back. Okay, go ahead, Szymon.
Do you see me, hear me? Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
There's something, yeah, it's not my fault. It's some kind of technical issues. Sorry, but I thought it's going to be better, but it's not. Yeah, the left. So the left get quite a good amount of votes. Zandberg won by a small margin because there was a very similar amount of votes for Zandberg and Magdalena Biejat, who is from this new left, but she is a former Razem MP also. So it was like kind of a fight between one Razem candidate and a former Razem senator, because she's not MP, she's a senator. So altogether, they got over 8% of votes. But there's also one small fringe candidate, Joanna Senyshyn, who comes back from this post-communist background. She was kind of a internet meme and were very popular among the young people. At some point, even her red corals were kind of a symbol of the second round because she supported Trzaskowski. And she got like 1.26% of the votes. So altogether, almost 10% of the votes went to the left candidates. Obviously, there were differences between them, but overall, it's one of the best amount of votes that left got from the presidential candidates since a very long time. So it's a good prospect. Razem is getting a lot of new people who want to join. We'll see if it's going to last, how long it's going to last, because it's a lot of young people. The problem is, especially with Razem, I think, is that it's very much it is dominated by young people, but it's also very much dominated by the people who live in big cities. They got a very good result in Poznań, which is a city located in the west of Poland. Very good. Zandberg, when the first round was, had the second place there. They had very good results in Warsaw. Now recently they were at my former university in Lublin. Zandberg was there after the elections, and it was the biggest meeting at that university ever had on that kind of an open meeting that they had with politicians. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, there is a big movement on this. Also, the New Left, which is a center-left party, is also getting some new people after that. It's not a big surge like in Razem, but there's also some kind of a movement in there. The Senishin, the third candidate, left candidate, mentioned said she's going to try to organize her own party. We'll see. So overall, there is a lot happening on the left. There is also one of the organizers of the 220 protests, the feminist organization, the Women's Strike, is thinking about organizing their own party as well. They asked their supporters what do they think, and 49% said they should organize a political party. So there is a kind of ongoing discussions, I would say, on the left and the center left, where to go further, which way is better, either to stay in the coalition like the new Lewica is doing, or to criticize it from outside, from the opposition, like Razem is doing. So I think fairly enough. I think there is enough voters to get both of those parties in the parliament, because although surveys show differently, they show like 5, 6, 7% for New Left, and 4 to 6, even 7% for Razem sometimes. So, but there's also a new survey that showed that not even the far right from Konfederacja is getting to the parliament, but even this new party organized by Grzegorz Braun, which is more on the far right, will probably get in the parliament as well. So good news and bad news.
Well, at least you have proportional representation, so different left currents can debate each other and not undermine each other so much. We got some questions and comments. Why don't we, with the time we have left, address those?
Yes, please.
So Vicky Corden says the right-wingers in Poland forget that Ukrainian refugees are working and paying taxes, so they have the same rights as everyone else.
Yes, I agree very much with that. With that point, they forget about it, and they use the same anti-immigrant rhetoric as they would use against, Bengali, Afghan, Syrian, or other refugees. It's this Schrödinger refugee that takes your job and takes your social benefits at the same time. It's just.
Yeah, that's the same issue and arguments we make here in the U.S. The refugee.
I think all over the world, I guess.
Yeah. Account basic importante. What do you think about the New York City elections and Zoran Mamdani? Do you think the Greens should endorse him? That's probably for me. And do you think PiS, that's the right-wing party, PIS, is causing Poland to be closer to a Poland exit from the EU after 2021? I think he means after 2027, but anyway.
Yeah.
Why don't you answer the second question?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of, the far right would probably want some kind of poll exit, but I don't think it's kind of a bigger sentiment in Law and Justice Party, really. People from outside tend to think that way, but they are very critical of the EU as this changing this political landscape. Like our traditional values, as they call them. But they also know it's also a helpful institution, especially for farmers, which are also their voters. So I wouldn't say it's not like UK. It's not gonna. There's a lot of talks about Hungary exiting EU. It won't happen. It won't happen with Slovakia, unless we get to the point really where really really far right forces will be in power, then maybe.
Well, I'll just say briefly on Zoran Mamdani, that's a campaign Greens should learn from. He's got a tremendous ground game. And as whether the Greens should endorse him, the New York City Greens, that's their decision. I don't know what they're thinking or what they're going to do. And let's talk about that next week, because I want to focus next week just on domestic politics, including the international ramifications, and we'll do a lot of question and answer then. But while we got Szymon here, let's focus on anything we can get from him about Poland and what it means for us. Justice V, nuclear is a huge problem, not to mention Razum partnering with Obama. I'm not aware of that, but I have an idea.
I don't know any partnering about Obama, but nuclear energy is very much supported by Razum, and actually one of the surveys showed that almost 93% of Polish people now support nuclear energy. I come from a different tradition. I was coming from this anti-nuclear movement, so I don't really share that view. But it was also a big part of Adrian Zandberg presidential elections campaign, nuclear energy, and it's widely supported in Razum and Polish society as a whole.
I imagine partnering with Obama means Razum parliamentarians met with Democrats during the Obama.
I don't know nothing.
Which, Greens and left parliamentarians in Europe, when they come to Washington, there are no Greens in the Congress, so they tend to meet with progressive Democrats.
I would need a link to comment on further, because I don't know what he's referring to really. So
yeah. Andrew Hager, man, the genocide caused by so many factors sounds worse than the attacks caused by the Red Ribbon Army from Dragon Ball. Yeah, sounds like a popular culture reference to either a video game or a movie. I don't know what it is. Do you know, Szymon?
I know what Dragon Ball is, but I don't know what the whole issue is about, really, the whole comment.
Is Dragon Ball a game or a movie?
It's an anime, old anime.
Oh, okay.
But I can answer because I don't know what's it about.
Vicky Corden, is Poland concerned with the possibility of an invasion by Russia if Ukraine fails? I hope that never happens.
Yeah, of course. It's a kind of I come from the east. I come from a region which is bordering Ukraine. There's two Polish regions which are bordering Ukraine. And it's a thing that people talk on a daily basis. Maybe they don't do it in Warsaw or in Szczecin or in Poznań, but they do it here in Lublin or Rzeszów. It's a kind of thing that people worry about. Obviously, we don't know if it will happen, but on a daily basis, we hear, like, every time, just to show you how it looks like, every time Ukraine is being attacked, the Polish planes
scramble. I think he's going to say they have to scramble because they have had some Russian planes violate Polish airspace, and they've had some missiles, including Ukrainian anti-air missiles, anti-missile missiles, end up in Poland. In fact, one of them killed some Poles. Maybe it was a couple of years ago. So, the war is right on Szymon's doorstep, because Lublin is very close to the Ukrainian border where he's from. So let's give Szymon a chance to come back for some final words. And now I'm looking to see if there are other questions in the chat that were raised, and I don't see any. Yeah, Anima. It's the only thing I know about that is Noah Lyles, the U.S. sprinter, is big on that. I just don't really know much about that. Here's Szymon.
Yeah, sorry again. It's just frustrating, but I can do nothing about it. What was the last question? I think I answered the
Yeah, you
one
did.
about
It was about Red Dragon.
planes. Oh, the
Oh, the
Russian
planes.
invasion.
Yeah, yeah. Explain that.
They fly all around the regions, the both regions bordering Ukraine. So we know that something happened even before we watch television next day and know that Ukraine was attacked. So it gives you kind of a glimpse how life looks here. Of course, it's nothing compared to Ukraine, but I come from a region which was affected by the war, because it was struck by a Ukrainian rocket that was used against Russian missiles, and accidentally went to the Polish village and killed two people. There was only two people killed on the Polish territory during the full-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine, and it's in the village of Przewodów, which is located in my region, very close to the border with Ukraine.
Okay, Simone, we've used up our hours. Are there any last thoughts you want to share with people?
I think obviously we have different situations in different countries, but what we can see around the world, and it's either US, it's India, it's Israel, it's Russia, but it's also many European countries. The far right is on the rise. It's very different. There are countries where the far right is very open to Russian politics. There are some countries which is different, like in Poland, but overall, this kind of new far right, this Trumpization of politics in the whole world is evolving, and I think we need to learn from each other and try to understand the things that are happening in other countries in details, to learn to see how we can cooperate, how to fight this menace, really, because without that, I think the left is an internationalist movement, and it should watch and learn other comrades. That's my perspective. And again, very sorry for the technical problems I caused, but I couldn't do nothing about it.
Yeah, well, that happens, and we really appreciate you being on, and in the spirit of left internationalism and sharing, what's going on in Poland. Next week, we're going to focus on the U.S. because there's so much to talk about. There's a lot to discuss. And in the meantime, those of you who are listening live stream on the West Coast, you can still get to those No King's Day demonstrations. I hope you do that. And I hope those of you in other parts of the country who were here were able to get to them earlier or participate in them in some way, because we gotta show mass resistance to what is going on, and how we defeat the far right is a longer discussion that I can get into now. We can talk about it next week, except to say briefly, if we rely on the Democrats, it's not going to happen. They compromise with the right. Joe Biden pursuing bipartisanship with the party that tried to overthrow his election is about all you need to know about that. So we'll talk about that next week, 3:00 Eastern time, live, and we'll be on the podcast platforms during the week. And once again, Szymon, thanks for being on.
Thank you very much, and I really hope you get on the demonstrations in large numbers for our American viewers here. It means a lot also for the left in other parts of the world, Europe as well. Thanks again for having me.
All right, everybody, have a good week.